What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Lexi J Wellness Podcast. I am your host, Lexi Johnson, and this is my husband and co-host, Brett Johnson, and we are going to talk about course correction today. Course correction is something I'm very passionate about, and we are actually coming off of a week-long vacation with Brett's family this past week, so it's very evident in our lives right now. It's Monday at this time of the recording, so it is a big course correction week for us, and I felt like it's so applicable to so many people, whether, it's been a very long stretch where you've stepped off the path, or maybe just a week long like us where we were just kind of out of our routine. And being such creatures of habits, it gives me a nice perspective of what great habits I do have in place. But I got back on Saturday, and I was being overly dramatic because we are very hard on ourselves. I mean, we maintained a lot of good habits. We got a gym membership at the place we were at, so we still exercise and things like that, but we're definitely eating out of our routine. And I was talking about how excited I was just to get back on track, and I was like, I just feel swollen. Even my socks feel tight, which is, maybe a little bit overly dramatic, but nonetheless, I was really excited to get back on track today. So figured we would share that with you guys, because I know it's definitely something that can, be applied for all of us. So welcome. Happy course correction week.
How's it going so far?
I was so excited. And I thrive on routine. So getting back, we woke up a little before 5, had our normal session here on the couch, reading, drinking our coffee. Brett does his morning visualization. I still need to get into that habit. I struggle with visualization. But we got that started, then we worked out, had a great morning, ate our normal breakfast and stuff. I don't know, today was kind of a blah day for me. It wasn't negative, it wasn't positive though. Just kind of putting the steps in place, but I mean, the systems are there, so I know tried and true, the evidence that if I just keep doing what I'm doing, then I'll be back on track. But it's not realistic, I don't think, to, one day back be like, all right, I'm back, baby, I'm in the groove. There's a little bit of, restiness.
Right. Yeah, to get in flow state, it takes more than just one day of getting back into it. And also, there's the part of it where the first day back in, it's just kind of a shit show, especially after you've been on vacation, because it's catch-up time. There's all the stuff that you weren't doing whenever you were gone, so it's always a lot the first day back in it. Second day back in it is also, a little bit of still catch-up, and then I feel like third day maybe, then that's whenever I feel like I'm back in flow state.
Yeah, just a lot of tying up loose ends today. So that definitely attributed to it. But I think we should probably just talk about what that means to come back, because something that I see a lot with clients is when they, when people go for a stretch, whether they're on vacation or a holiday, or maybe they've just been gone for a really long time, not doing the habits that serve them. When they come back to it, they think that they need to overcompensate, and they need to, restrict calories. They need to over-exercise and really just make themselves miserable. And what that plan is in your mind is that, okay, I can, just purge myself, overly exhaust myself for this short amount of time, and it'll make up for that time. And that's really not a healthy or sustainable route. It's also not one that you can maintain long-term. So it ends up not serving you very well, and you don't develop the habits that are going to serve you long term and get you where you want to go. So for us, it's very simple, truly. And I think that a lot of people think that, successful people gatekeep the habits or the tasks that have gotten them to that point. But it's really just maintenance over time and continuing to do those really boring tasks that we've talked about day in and day out. So for me, the course correction from a physical standpoint and a health standpoint means I'm tracking my food. I'm going to get consistent protein calories, and those are specified to me, and what my goals are and my activity level, my needs. I'm going to get my step goal, which a step goal is something that I'm really passionate about. I'm very strict on a step goal. Actually, as Brett was setting up the cameras and the microphones, I was like taking hot laps around the couch because I'm currently about 300 steps away from my goal tonight. And I'm a firm believer that your step goal should also be something that you have to intentionally put in effort. It's not a passive standard. If you're reaching your step goal without any extra effort, then that's a standard. That's not a goal. And then just being more intentional with my workouts, making sure that they're at the intensity that I have established for myself, and I get my water and I get my sleep, which, I mean, very basic stuff. It's simple, but not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, it's not, you shouldn't be coming back and trying to get back in your groove and just trying to like take away, basically try to subtract all these things from your daily routine, or your diet, more often than not, in order to compensate for the huge surplus, that you had while you were a little off your game, on vacation. We were enjoying ourselves on vacation, and I think that's something that we earn, and we enjoy ourselves to the point where we're not really having to worry too much about what we're doing in the moment. Of course, we still hold a lot of, like you said, we hold ourselves to a very high standard. So our out of our routine mode is still pretty in routine, in the grand scheme of things, but we always feel like we're just a little out of it whenever we come back from vacation and we've eaten like we don't usually eat, and you don't, just mentally, you're always a little bit off just because you're not getting up and doing the normal habits.
Yeah, and I think because we have solidified these habits into our daily routine, so like they're so ingrained into our routine. Even on the weekends, it's typically backed up a couple hours, but we still do those same things. We wake up, we have our coffee, we have our, we read, whether we are home, away, weekend, on 75 hard or not. Like, reading those pages is a part of our day in and day out. And that's just a small example of it. But like, those things are so ingrained into our habits that when there is any sort of deviation from those habits and we're out of town or something like that, and it's not exactly the way that we typically perform it, I think that those are just like highlighted. So it, like you said, it's our out of routine is definitely not, off the rails by any means, but it gives me a nice perspective of how good I feel executing on my normal routine and just being in that state. And it reinforces those daily habits that sometimes, like, it's not always the most fun to get your steps in or to go for that walk, get outside, get your fresh air, to drink water when you would rather drink anything else. But it's good perspective to have when you feel less than ideal, because it just reminds you of how much those things serve you. And it reminds you of the self-confidence that you build by continually dialing in and continuing to invest in yourself. Otherwise, if you put yourself on cruise control and you just let your habits slip, then it's only a matter of time until you start to, it's going to compound in the other direction, where that self-confidence is starting to slip right alongside it, because you're making negotiations with yourself and compromises with your standards, and it'll start to affect every other realm. So
normal is good.
Yeah.
That's what I've determined. Whenever we got home and we just walked into the house, simple things like just coming home and being in your own house. After, it becomes just such a monotonous cycle. You don't always think about just coming home, to the roof that's over your head, your safe haven, little things like that. And just having your routines, something that you can fall into without even really having to think about it. It's just this subconscious behavior that you start to create over time. And those are the habits that we're talking about. And it's comfortable. It feels good to feel good about what you're doing. And your body just gets in this, what I call flow state. And it's just, it's tough to really explain if you've never experienced it before, but normal, quote unquote normal, whatever your normal is, it just feels really good.
Yeah. And I also think that it's worth saying that 1 week off track, whether it was just a slight deviation from your normal routine or maybe you just went balls to the wall and you went crazy, but like 1 week off track is not going to derail your progress any more than one perfect dialed in week is going to get you where you want to go. So if you did indulge over the weekend or you went wild for a holiday or anything or a vacation, it's still worth coming back to. It's still coming back to those habits that serve you, because when you get a flat tire, you don't slash the other three. It's silly. So, and putting it into that perspective and just understanding that, okay, you stepped off the path. It's just a matter of getting back to it and coming back to those very basic principles that have gotten you to that point.
Right. So we were on vacation for a full week, which is a really long vacation for us. Like typically if we're
It's
on
the longest vacation we've taken since our honeymoon. I think it's, ever, really.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long vacation. It was a family vacation, so it wasn't just like one of our weekend getaways where, we are going for, an extended weekend, 3-4 day type deal. But whenever you're on for that extended period of a time, it's a full week. And while we were not fully out of our routine for the entire week, you have to think still that even if we were, there's 1 week out of the 52 that, assuming that we're good to go the rest of the 51, which probably isn't a realistic expectation for most people, but just to entertain my example here, you still have 51 other weeks out of the year. If you look at that from that 30,000 foot view, that 51 week period where you are doing what you should be doing, that's going to outweigh your 1 week off, as long as you don't let that 1 week turn into a whole slew of them.
Yeah. That's kind of the same principle as when November hits, people tend to just throw out all ambition of making a lifestyle change or anything, because they're like, well, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And if you think about it, that's 2, maybe 3, we'll give you 4 days over the span of 2 entire months where people are just justifying those 2 to 3 days of indulgence and being like, it is not worth my time. These 8 weeks, are just completely overshadowed by basically 72 hours, maybe. And even that is extremely exaggerated. But it's just you underestimate those seemingly insignificant daily habits and overestimate the damage or the lack of repair you can do from what you did in a week or a weekend or a holiday or whatever.
Yeah. Do you see people fall off the wagon more?
Yes.
Do you see people fall off the wagon more? Like, let's just stick to the nutrition side of it. I feel like nutrition versus workouts are definitely something, where there's a higher probability that somebody's going to fall off on nutrition versus falling off of just doing their workouts. Because for whatever reason, humans have a really hard time, just not shoveling stuff in their mouth, even though it seems like a simple thing. Moving your body for an extended period of time seems like it would be a lot harder thing to stay consistent with than just not shoveling garbage down your throat. But
Right.
That's exactly what the case is. So.
But honestly, I'm that way for the longest time, and nutrition is still the thing that I struggle with the most, because I enjoy working out so much, and I know exactly what I need to eat and how I need to eat and how good I feel when I eat well. But it's still, and I think that it's important to share, because a lot of people don't believe me when I say that. But a lot of women specifically that come to us for nutrition help, they struggle, they undereat because they're scared to eat more calories. I am an overeater to my core. I can put it away. So I have to add that piece of relatability, because that is something that I certainly struggle with also. And it's just a mental recalibration that I constantly have to remind myself. And tracking has honestly given me a really great awareness of that and how I can make that work for me. But go back to your question.
What on that topic though, isn't that wild how one person can differ so much in that, you and me, we would much likely much more likely overeat than undereat. But some people have this huge issue with undereating. You know, it's just, I can't even imagine
I think that
going along in my day to day and like force feeding myself.
yeah,
You know, if I'm lacking in protein or whatever the situation is.
yeah.
That's what it is most
When
of the
people
time.
are like, I just forgot to eat lunch, and I'm like, I can't relate to that any less.
Right.
But I do think someone had mentioned this, and I've read several times. But like, I think a lot of it can be attributed to the way that you're raised, and if you're encouraged when you're younger to clean your plate, and you can't leave the table until you've cleaned your plate, until you
That's true.
like that's ingrained in you. That's part of your subconscious. That's
That is very true. You think, how much of that do you think it has to do with your upbringing?
yeah, absolutely, yeah, for sure.
I think it's 80% of it.
I mean, I don't know that I could quantify it, but I
Yeah.
do think a lot of it underneath, and it's
You know,
interesting because
it's
I was
the
also
nature versus nurture conversation.
yeah, because I'm also just a really strange eater. So I never really liked the foods that the rest of my family was eating because I'm big on textures. Textures are really weird for me and my dietary habits. I don't like a lot of textures that are normalized and loved by a lot of people. So I was constantly, encouraged to finish my food and to try a bite of everything. And I am too damn stubborn. So I had fallen asleep at the table several times. But that is something I think that, like, with me not wanting to eat a lot of that food, not for the sake of me not being hungry or anything, I just didn't like it. And I wasn't going to eat something that I didn't like. I think that part of that is probably in my brain there, somewhere hidden deep. But I've always thought about that because I do think that if you're encouraged or it's reinforced that you need to finish your plate, you need to try one of everything or whatever before you can get up from the table, then that's definitely something you're going to carry with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But go back to that question.
That whole topic of what we have access to in this day and age and how accessible food is and how it's here in such great quantities, and so much of it is just actually garbage. You know, it's extremely satisfying, and it's chemically made to be that way.
Well,
to satisfy your taste buds for a very short spurt.
That's what I was going to add to. And in another sense, it's not satisfying whatsoever because it's chemically manipulated to, like, take that satisfaction awake really quickly, to dissipate,
to make you crave more.
And then that craving response will continue. It's really it's difficult if you it's difficult, and something that I empathize with a lot.
It's like a mini dopamine hit, and then it goes away, and it makes you want more.
Yeah, and something that I empathize with a lot in people, like, it is so easy to become addicted to food with the way that it's chemically formulated. Like, it is, these junk food companies have extremely brilliant scientists at their disposal and incredible science that they use to manipulate those, and it's very
somewhat evil.
Yeah, it is, and it's not fair. It's like the odds are definitely stacked against us because they know how to manipulate, like, the craving centers and the response triggers in our brains to make you want more. And something that I really empathize with, and that it's a struggle, because if you're addicted to food, you still have to eat food to survive. It's not like you can cut out. I mean, if you're addicted to cocaine, you got to cut out cocaine cold turkey. Right. You don't need it 3 times a day. You don't need it every single day.
Yeah, that's probably not discussed enough, because that is, I think, the hardest thing for people that have a food addiction is just that, is that they can't cut it out completely. They have to have it, to a certain extent. You have to have it to survive. People don't, most people don't treat it as fuel for your body. They treat it as like a
therapy for emotions.
Yeah, like an event. Like every meal is an event, and I'm here to see how much I can throw down.
Yeah, just imagine if you were an alcoholic, but you also still had to have a Jack and Coke 3 times a day.
Yeah,
like that's incredibly hard. So yeah, that's definitely something that I think about a lot. I'm like, dang, that would suck. Just because it's such a fine line to walk.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I've cut you off 3 times since
Well,
you've
I kind of
started
derailed
asking
my
this
own question to begin with. Just, I get all these different fleeting thoughts because there's so many different branches to that tree that, that we're touching on here. The core of it being nutrition and and exercise, but most we're touching on nutrition more than anything, and just how many different variables there are with it, with how people can get derailed. But I think what I was initially going to say is, from your perspective with your line of work, how often do you think you see people fall off the wagon with their nutrition because they like the metaphor you always use is they have one tire that goes flat, so they slash the other 3. They just say, screw it, I'm out.
Yeah.
Or if it's like some exterior element that just gets thrust into their life, so they have a loved one that dies, or if they have some health complication or something of that nature. Do you think it's usually people that can't mentally get themselves back on track because they say, screw it, I had 3 bad days, or I had a girls weekend or guys weekend, whatever, so I'm out, screw it? Or is it some sort of outside element, maybe some unforeseen event that happens that causes them just to totally fall off the wagon? Because I think that those are 2 of the biggest things, that force people out of getting into flow state.
Yeah, I think that more often than not, it's the first. It's that people look at achieving and, quote unquote, winning the day in such a binary way that you're either on track or you're not. And if you slip up, if someone brings in donuts for breakfast in the office and you have a donut, then you're like, well, today's already a loss. We might as well, go hog wild with it. We might as well capitalize on this lost day and order out lunch instead of eating that meal prep we brought. We already had that donut, so now I can cancel the walk that I was planning this afternoon because, what's the point? And when people stop looking at it in such a black and white, yes or no, pass or fail option, which a lot of times we do discuss, like, did you win the day or did you lose the day? But I think that it's important to understand that, like, you can make strides towards continuing to better that day. And just because you made one incorrect decision, or not even an incorrect, just the lesser option there, like, you can continue to make strides. And one step backwards does not mean you have to completely put it in reverse. Like,
put it in reverse, Terry.
That's right. But I definitely think that it's when people think, okay, I've slipped up a little bit, might as well just call it a day. And then a body at rest wants to stay at rest. So once you start letting off the gas, it's just easier and easier. And when you start breaking promises to yourself, it just becomes easier and easier to continue breaking promises to yourself, because, things like that are a habit like anything else. When you continue to keep promises, then it becomes something that it doesn't sit right with you when those negotiations start happening in your mind. Like, I'm going to finish this podcast and I'm going to walk laps around this couch to get my step goal, because it wouldn't sit right with me if I just went upstairs and went to bed without completing that, just because that's the standard I hold. But if I were to continually just compromise with myself, look at my watch and say, okay, I didn't make it today, maybe tomorrow, then that's just a continued compromise I'm making, and it's going to become easier and easier to slip upon. And that can be said for any number of things outside of health and fitness. Like, if you don't read to your kids tonight and then you're too tired to do it tomorrow and you're too tired to do it the next day, then it just becomes a continued habit broken, which is just a habit in itself.
Yeah. I think so many people just have really, really low standards for themselves. And I see it all the time. Like, I'm very perceptive of that now. I think because I hold myself to such a high standard, and it really, it makes you so keenly aware of the people around you. And even the people that you've been around all your life. And then all of a sudden your eyes are kind of open to it, and you're like, man, I never really was aware of this before, but now I am. And, also people you're just passing by, and then you start piecing things together and you realize, well, because they hold all these low standards, they're not even aware of it because they're just kind of going through the motions, going through life, not really caring. That's why they are where they are. They're not making any progress because they hold themselves to such low standards. Down to the very, very basic things in life. I am OCD. And I was kind of raised around that sort of. Just giving me a look. If you're not watching the YouTube version. Please watch the YouTube. So I was raised around people that were very particular. And I'm
contributing to this conversation.
And I am not resentful of that whatsoever. Like, I'm very happy with where I am in my life. Now, there are certain things that plague me, that bother me, that may or may not ruffle feathers in my marriage because I have a way of pointing things out sometimes that may be a little less than desirable. But I've incorporated these things into my life and found ways to mentally, for myself, be able to hold myself to a certain standard, even down to the nitty-gritty things. Like if I see something on the floor, if it's the smallest thing, I'm going to pick it up and throw it away. If I see something that's out of place on my desk, everything is, by the time I leave for the day, everything is going to be neat and tidy. Even if my desk is slam-packed with paperwork, it's going to be neat and tidy. Like, I'm going to have a place for everything. And when I come to work the next day, I know where everything's at, even if I have 600 things sitting around, because I've compartmentalized all these different things in my mind. And these are just little things that I do that I hold myself to a high standard with, so I don't get caught off guard that often. I don't lose track of things. I don't forget things that often. And I think that goes back to, how you perform each of these daily things. People, as people get older, I think, your cognitive abilities start to regress over time. That's just the way it works. But I think that your bad habits really have a way of starting to show their face as you get older, because you can't compensate for those bad habits anymore by having, a really sharp mind, or, having a really good short-term memory or long-term memory. Those things start to get a little bit worse as you age. And I think, like I said, that as you get older, your bad habits really start to surface. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. And because as you get older, you have to also think that those bad habits have just been compounding over time.
Yeah, so, very true.
Just as someone that has been executing on really great habits for a decade, those great habits are going to you're going to be able to eat the fruits of those labors.
If you're staying flat for 10 years while the guy that's the same age as you has been on a linear path, for 10 years, you're going to really start to see some separation there.
Yeah. And I don't even really believe that there is any neutrality, like you said flat, like, just as I don't really believe that neutrality in your mood is possible. I said today was kind of a blah, not negative, not positive. So maybe I'm contradicting myself, but I do think, like, if you're not actively taking those steps, and it's not going to be linear. So having that expectation, if you were to draw a line, hopefully you would make continued progress in the right direction. But
right, linear was probably not the best way to say it, but yeah, on average,
yeah. But those same daily actions, simple disciplines, are going to continue serving you today as they will 10 years from now, and those same negotiations and compromises you continue to make with yourself, seemingly insignificant from day to day, are going to continue to build up, because
it's the compound effect.
Yeah. And the example that I always like to use is that no one has that heart attack in the drive-through eating a double quarter pounder like that.
Right.
that consequence is far
It's
delayed. So it's sometimes
the opposite of delayed gratification.
yeah, it's ignorance is bliss, or just refusing to connect those dots that was what led to it, and that and many decisions much like it is going to have a very foreseeable outcome. But because it doesn't happen in those moments and it's not immediate, then we choose to ignore it. Just as you're not going to finish a workout and have a six-pack, so what's the point in this moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, you've mentioned that on a number of occasions. We discuss a lot, delayed gratification, but what we don't discuss is, your bad choices that don't show their face immediately, but they will show themselves, 10 times down the road, because the compound effect is still working. It's just working
Against
compounding the bad stuff.
Yeah, it'll expose you, and and maybe this is a little harsh to say, but I think that I certainly can say it, because when you hear of someone that maybe has been overweight their entire life and has been completely sedentary, and they make such poor health decisions, and then something happens to their health, you hear people and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this would happen. And we'll have connect the breadcrumbs, or look at the breadcrumbs, because I think that we could have all seen this happen. But if you choose to think that it was chance, or that it was by happenstance, then you can't put the blame anywhere. But
yeah, whenever people say that they drew the short straw, with their health, or with their their physical fitness, whatever, however you want to describe it, and it's evident that every decision they've made has led them to the point they're at right now. It wasn't just some miraculous, thing that they were born with, that, they just were destined to be extremely unhealthy and overweight. Like it sounds insensitive, but you didn't draw the short straw. You did this to yourself, and it's no coincidence that you have all of these side effects as a result of the choices that you've made. And your lifespan is going to be shortened because of it, and you're going to have health complications, and you're not going to live comfortably, and your loved ones are going to not get to know you as long as they could have.
Yeah, and
it's not any mystery.
Someone had actually just reached out to me after listening to last week's episode, when I had talked about my dad and being the child of someone that neglected their health for a long time, and seeing that in someone that I cared about really, really deeply, and someone that meant a lot to me, and just being completely helpless for it. And she had said this journey for me, she said, I had always said that I wanted to be healthy one day to get pregnant, but she said, when you said that, then it really hit home that someone was going to be looking at me one day, and just knowing that was a consequence of my actions. And it's important to take that ownership, because if you're not taking responsibility where it's due, then you're continually playing that victim card and saying, like, I can't believe this keeps happening to me. I can't believe that everyone else feels confident and strong and healthy and happy and they have energy, but I don't, and that's just not fair. But when you continue to sit in the back seat of your life and not make those actionable choices to make a change, then nothing is going to change, and you can't expect it to. So if you're not taking ownership of it and being a responsible, taking action for it. I had seen someone share something statistically about the difference between a lifespan and a health span, and how they're not always the same, because someone can live for a long time, but they're not healthy for a great amount of it. But in an ideal world, your lifespan and your health span would almost be equal.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. I liked that phrasing, because so many times I see it all the time where people neglect their health and they're alive, but they're not living much, and it's affecting their quality of life, and it's affecting their relationships. It's affecting their their professional life.
Right. This is a extreme, way of describing it, but you said, they're alive, but they're not living. We've all had the conversation at some point or another where we've known somebody or heard of somebody that was still alive, but they didn't have any quality of life. And then you're like, man, I hate that for them. I would never want to be in that situation. There's people that say, if I'm in that situation, pull the plug. Because I don't want to be a vegetable. If I don't have any quality of life, then why would I want to be alive? But people go throughout their entire life essentially living like that. They don't experience anything exciting. They don't experience anything fun or enjoyable because they're miserable. They're physically, emotionally miserable.
And
it's a sad existence.
And you saying anything fun or exciting, a lot of people are going to automatically tie that to monetary things and being like, well, I don't have money to do anything fun or exciting, so what's the point? But that's not at all what we mean.
That's a cop out.
Well, yeah, it's playing basketball with your kids in the driveway. It's going for bike rides. It's hiking with your spouse. It's going and having fun with your girlfriends and just enjoying life and not feeling like you're restricted by your own body and not feeling like a prisoner in your own skin. In a book I had read recently, it said that, I can't remember what this exact statistic was, something like 58% of people will not read a book past high school. And it paralleled a percentage of people in the world that are illiterate. So it said, what's the difference between those people that never read a book again and the people that are illiterate? Like, they're not actively using those skills. And then, as you were saying, the people that have no quality of life. And for an example of someone that doesn't have the choice. So someone that was in a horrible accident or something of that nature where they physically cannot get a workout in. There is not much difference between that person and the person that's actively choosing to not be active. They're sitting on the couch. They're going from a laying state, sleeping, into a sitting state in their car, into a sitting state at their desk, into a sitting state on the couch, back to a laying state at bed. Repeat process day in and day out. You're not actively using those the body capabilities that you have, so
right.
What's the point of having them?
Yeah.
It's incredibly sad when you think about it that way, because those people would do anything to have the capabilities that you're taking for granted day in and day out.
That's what I was going to say, is that, it's heartbreaking to think about the people that have just lost all ability to do something that they either, they love doing, or that they, that they wanted to do. Can't remember the guy's name from Kansas City that got ALS, that was a professional bodybuilder, or, he had incredible physique, and then he lost control of all of his, muscular functionality in his body. It's a horrible situation, and your heart goes out to people like that. I can't fathom the mental toll that would take on a person and the loved ones around them. And you tie that back to yourself, and it's tough to keep that sort of perspective on a day-to-day basis. You hear it once and you're like, man, I'm super thankful that I'm able to move. But you don't wake up every day and think about all the little tiny things that you have the ability to do, just the tiny, just the fine motor skills that you have in your fingers, and being able to get up and walk upright without any assistance whatsoever, and getting in your, waking up in an air-conditioned or heated home. There's just so many, I jump from physical capabilities to, an environmental type privilege that we have. But you get where I'm going with it. There's just so many things you take for granted, and you don't realize just how fortunate you are until you realize how quickly it can all be taken away. And that disease by itself is one that really strikes me hard. Every time I hear about somebody that has that, I would encourage anybody, that struggles with recognizing things to be grateful for. Just think about that one singular thing, that you love doing, that could be taken away from you just in an instant, and that immediately is going to make you grateful.
Yeah. And it's and down to the finite things of you've never had to, remind your brain to help you breathe, or to, put one foot in front of the other, and things like that I take for granted every single day. But recently the last thing I wanted to do was record a workout, and thankfully Brett was nearby and gave me a little perspective, because we were having that conversation shortly before, and he was like, how devastated you would be if this is something like, if this was the last workout you ever got to record, or if you could no longer do that, if that was just stripped away from you. And it absolutely could be, and it's important to recognize that. So we definitely should course correct this conversation because we've really gone on kind of a tangent here. But I think that it's important perspective to recognize that we have capabilities that are, I don't know, it's just good to think about, put yourself into that position.
100%. Yep. Be mindful of all the capabilities and privileges that you have, because there's somebody who doesn't have that wishes they did. And if you keep that mindset on a day-to-day basis, I'd say you have a pretty, strong footing right out the gate to have a good day.
Yeah. And I think that just in closing, we should talk about the compound effect, or just circle back to it, because whether it was a week off track, a weekend off track, or you've been off of it for months or years at a time, you've been compounding little by little in one direction or another. Momentum works both ways. If you start to really sit in those habits that are not serving you, or that are negative to your health or your relationships or your finances, your profession, then it's going to continue to snowball. It's going to pick up steam, and it's going to start building upon itself. But in the exact same sense, if you start to invest in yourself and you start to take out those, or I shouldn't even say take out, start crediting yourself. If you think about it like a bank account, and you start crediting yourself and investing into your health and into your consumption of everything around you. That includes the people that you're surrounding yourself with, the content that you're consuming. If you start taking a little audit of everything that you're putting in your body and your brain, then you're undoubtedly going to start heading into the direction that you want. Or you're going to recognize that you're not heading the way that you want, and you can, now it's just up to making a little pivot, because it's always a good time to course correct.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that there's really no such thing as staying flat, staying neutral. You can imagine it that way, but in all reality, that doesn't really exist. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And I guess in my mind, a way to to think of that in like real world terms is if you think of $10,000 invested in the stock market, and you think of it, what it's going to be in 20 years. If you actually, you go back and look and see what $10,000 would have been if you'd invested it in 2020, or excuse me, in 2000, then you look at 2020 and look and see what the value of that $10,000 is. If you took that $10,000 and just had that cash sitting in the safe, that $10,000, in your mind, you may be thinking, whenever you put it in the safe, well, I've got $10,000, that's awesome. I just set that aside. That $10,000 is worth less than what it was in 2020 than it was in 2000 because of inflation. I mean, that $10,000 is infinitely less valuable. That's a real world example that I'm trying to paint the picture of. She's giving me a funny look now.
I know, you're kind of losing me. But hopefully
she doesn't like whenever
hopefully
I get
the
down.
stock market girlies can follow along with you. I'm sure that one hit home for some people. It just kind of went over my head, but I'm glad that you shared.
Thanks.
No, I'm like, well, is it still $10,000 sitting in your safe?
It is, but with inflation, that $10,000 is has a lot less buying
I know,
power
but
in 2020
but
than
like
it did in
in
2000.
in my mind, I'm like, okay, it has to. For the analogy we're shooting for here, it's like someone came and stole a couple $1,000s.
Well, okay, so $10,000 may have bought you a brand new car in 2000, but $10,000 would.
You're talking buying power, not physically $10,000, because it's still $10,000, right?
Yes, in money terms, I think that people see where I'm coming from here,
Right,
but
yeah.
yes, it is still $10,000.
I hope the audience is smarter than I.
Yeah. Well, you're incredibly intelligent, but for whatever reason, you just refused to dive into that. But
no, I was just
money isn't real since we got off the gold standard. It's a Dwight Schrute quote.
I know. All right, do you have any closing comments?
Well, just kind of revolving back to course correcting. Life is literally constant course correction. It's not like these huge dramatic shifts that you have to make. It shouldn't be a deal where you're course correcting these massive, changes every year. It's literal tiny little changes day after day after day. It's don't think of it as this course correction where you have to do a full 180. It's small little course corrections along the way.
That's a good point to make also, because I think we're definitely putting it in broader terms of we went on a vacation, but really, I mean, you course correct, as I mentioned earlier, like, okay, someone brings donuts into the office and you have a donut, you can still make that day a step in the right direction. You can still progress forward. It's a moment to moment recalibration. It's about choosing, the next option and not dwelling on that past decision and making it just consume you, because then it can be really easy just to get consumed by one imperfect decision and then just consider yourself, like I had talked about earlier, like it's a black and white thing, as if the whole day is a loss, but that's not the truth. And when you think of it in that way, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you're also discrediting a lot of progress you can make.
For sure.
And dismissing a lot of opportunity there. And it's an opportunity in resilience and grit. And if you can, take it on the chin and just get back up every single time, then it's not a loss at all. It's a learning experience.
Yeah. There's so many attributes that you gain through this process of course correction throughout your life that we didn't really touch on. You get so much out of being cognizant of how you can be better constantly. Like you said, the grit, the resilience, the fortitude, you build the diligence. It all starts to come together, and that compound effect over time is going to create the end result that you're going to be proud of, and that is going to be so worth it in the end. Yeah,
and bringing up pride, like it's a huge opportunity to develop self-confidence. I can't tell you. So every Friday in the Lexi J Wellness Facebook group, I post, I'm like, tell me a win from your week or a positive from your week. Tell me something that you're really happy and proud about. I can't tell you how many times people take it from a stance of course correction when they're like, man, I was sick on Monday, and in the past I would have just let that derail my entire week, but here we go. Or I didn't get groceries, I didn't meal prep earlier in the week, but I bounced back. Or I had this misfortune happen, but I overcame. And when you continue to do those and you realize that it's not something that, okay, in the past, maybe you would have let this completely derail you, but not anymore. And you start to form that identity of yourself that you are someone that is resilient enough to face an adversity, little or big, and see it through and come back stronger. Then you start forging forward with that mentality that you can take on something even larger, and you can see that through. You can do hard things.
For sure.
And I think that it helps withstand that undoubted, the little dips in that not so linear path towards the forward progression that you want.
Yeah. All the habits that you build along the way prepare you for those dips, because then okay, well, this is temporary. Here's what I need to do just to get back on track, because that's life. If you're not experiencing those dips, then you're not alive, because everybody's experiencing that, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and if you didn't experience those dips, then you wouldn't be nearly as appreciative of the really great moments.
Right. Success doesn't exist without failure.
Correct. All right. I think that's all I've got. Anything else?
Nope. Like always, if you guys enjoyed the show, if you got something out of it, we'd appreciate it if you would share it with a friend. And we appreciate you guys listening.
Yeah. If you have any topics, any suggestions, shoot them in the YouTube comments and we'll be reading them.
Yeah, even if you're not listening to the YouTube version, hop on there and post them in the comments, because that's the easiest way for us at this point to field those questions and get to sift through them and pick one or two out to discuss in a future show.
Yeah, we love hearing the feedback. Thank you guys. Hope you have a great week.
Thanks,
Go
guys.
Chiefs.
Go Chiefs.